Isabel Oakeshott also is a kid and signed up to Common Sense throughout her career. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. I couldn't believe that press conference by Donald Trump
Amazing.
yesterday. You played out the perfect clip there. There was a lot to choose from, by the way. I had another favourite, which was the moment that he laid into the boss of the transport department,
Yes.
basically calling the guy a disaster. I think the word he used was a disaster, and
Yeah.
then went on to say that the guy was very good at bullshit. That was the actual word
Yes.
he used. As you say, this is a very serious story, and it's just the only reason I've got a smile on my face is because Donald Trump's language is so entertaining for us Brits when we are so bored of hearing the robotic Keir Starmer. He does have a point, doesn't he? You know, if the policy is actually to be inclusive of people with, quote, severe intellectual disability, it's kind of an accident waiting to happen.
Exactly.
And it did happen.
And I think the trouble for all of us is that we know that whatever, you know, we think about the United States of America, we know that we're doing the same thing here. And one of the reasons why our state, the ship of state, if you like, is kind of, you know, falling behind and sort of sliding into the sea slowly, capsizing, is because it's being run by people who think that the DEI business is a good idea. That, you know, let's all be terribly inclusive. Let's get more dwarfs. Let's get more intellectually challenged people. And I think he was saying that in January, the Biden administration actually ordered people with severe mental disability to be given jobs controlling aircraft. I mean, it's completely bonkers.
Yeah, I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, that is actually insane. And Trump made big politics out of this yesterday. And if he's to be believed, and I haven't checked out whether the chronology of events is as he says it is, but essentially he said he put better measures in place when he was president.
Yeah.
Biden then unraveled them, and only last week Trump tried to put them all back in place, and not in time to make enough difference for this accident not to happen. So if that is all true, then Trump can justifiably make tremendous political capital out of this awful human tragedy. And there's no holding him back, is there? He's full on, absolutely gone for it.
And the thing, and I said this, sorry to interrupt you, I said this earlier, that I was listening to some of the commentary around it, you know, by some of our colleagues in the broadcast business, and they were all horrified, as they always are. You know, this has never happened before, you know, so soon after a terrible disaster where people have died, you know, he's using it for political capital. Well, actually, no, he's not absolutely using it for that. What he's doing is saying that people are sick to death of inquiries, sick to death of being told we'll find out what happens in about 3 years' time and report back. You know, no, people who talk as normal people do were saying yesterday, how could this possibly have happened? We need to know. He said it shouldn't have happened. Somebody should have prevented it from happening. He's absolutely right.
Completely. And can you imagine if we'd had someone like Donald Trump leading our country after the Axel Rudikabana horror?
Yeah.
You know, the equivalent of that would have been Keir Starmer standing up and saying, you know, how horrific this was. And here's what we know, folks, including the whole terror dimension of it. But instead, we got British politics, which is to pretend there's nothing much to see here. Let's all move on while there's an investigation underway, which excuses politicians from having to say anything about anything. I love the way Trump rips up that playbook. He's just like, you know, I'm just going to tell you what I know, and I'm just going to tell you as much as I can so that you don't get fobbed off. You don't get told we'll come back to you in 3 years' time when you've all forgotten about it because there's been so many other tragedies in the interim.
Right, exactly right. And I've just got a bit of breaking news here from the FAA, obtained by the Associated Press. Apparently there was only one air traffic controller working at the time of the fatal collision. I mean, that beggars belief, doesn't it?
Well, I don't know how many should be on duty, but it sure as hell sounds like there should be more than one presiding over.
Well, what happens when he goes to the toilet?
Well, you make a very, very good point there. And is it perhaps that, you know, some of the staff there only work on certain days? Are they the kinds of people that put at the end of their emails, please note my working hours are and my working days are etc. I'd fire all those people,
Yeah,
you know.
definitely. Absolutely right. Let's talk about what's on the front pages here this morning. Although, before we do that, maybe we should mention Brexit. 5 years on, obviously, you know, you'll remember where you were, not so much on the day of the result of the referendum, but more on this day, because I remember feeling a great sense of optimism and thinking, you know, although I wasn't feeling particularly well, I seem to remember, there was basically a sort of a feeling in there. You and I may have been at the same party. I was at a party on Piccadilly somewhere, and we were sort of toasting. Jim Davidson was there, Nigel Farage was there, toasting this brand new future that we were about to look forward to, where we were unfettered by those awful people in the European Union, and it all seemed like a great idea, and it kind of all just didn't happen.
Well, it was a great idea, and I do remember where I was. I think I was on the backstage at the big rally that we had to celebrate
in Parliament Square.
In Parliament Square, and I know Julia Hartley-Brewer was there, and a number of court colleagues were probably there too, and giving speeches, and we sang, and it was really an absolutely amazing historic moment. And 5 years on, it has not yet fulfilled anything like its potential. I mean, Nigel Farage himself has been quite open that a number of things are not less difficult than they were, they're more difficult than they were. That doesn't mean it wasn't the right idea. It doesn't mean that it's not a great thing that we have the potential now to make the best of it, but this government isn't going to do it. It's been a massive, massive historic betrayal, not just by this new government, which is barely concealing its desire for closer ties with the EU. In fact, Rachel Reeves articulated that earlier this week, saying we've got to get closer to the EU. It's the last thing that we need to be doing. They're a bucket case. They're going down the pan faster than we are. But it's not just this government that is going to increase the betrayal. It's what the Tories did, because most people voted for Brexit for one reason, and that is immigration. They were horrified by the uncontrolled immigration into our country that was associated with free movement of people. You know, that was part of the deal if you're in the EU. And so we ended free movement of people, but guess what? We replaced it with come one, come all from all other parts of the world. Brilliant. So 1 million net migration. Yeah, that's not what people signed up for. We've got to undo that.
It's absolutely right. And Nigel Farage has written in the Express today, he's also in the Telegraph, but he's basically said he thinks that actually, in the end, looking back, he doesn't even believe Boris Johnson's heart was actually really in it.
Well, I mean, that doesn't really surprise me, because Boris Johnson notoriously wrote 2 different articles, one in favour of Brexit and one against Brexit, before he decided which one he fancied publishing. So, you know, Boris Johnson is an opportunist, and there are many good things about Boris Johnson, but no one can say that he's an ideologue. You know, all the things we thought that we were could be sure of about Boris Johnson, in particular that he's a libertarian, you know, that he believes in freedom of choice, all went out the window under the pressure of COVID, didn't they? I mean, this was a guy that used to say, you know, don't let's worry about standards for school lunch for kids. Let's shove them some pies through the railings of the playground if they're not getting turkey Twizzlers. You know, that's how much he was in favour of freedom. And then he went on to be the Prime Minister that locked us down again and again and again. So this isn't a man of high principle. He is a man who looks out first and foremost for Boris Johnson. He did good things. I don't want to take away from his leadership on Ukraine and a number of other things. But he didn't make the most of Brexit. He will, of course, blame the pandemic for that loss of opportunity.
No doubt. What we can't see the Labour government blaming anything on, really, apart from themselves, is this farmland move that they're making, this land grab that they appear to be making. And I can't help thinking there's much more to this than just a kind of Westminster obsession with not understanding the countryside and deliberately changing the way that Britain actually produces food, because that, to all intents and purposes, is what's happening. We're told from the Telegraph's front page story, 1/10 of farmland is going to be axed for net zero.
Marvellous. Well, look, farmers, here's my message to you. You can't have it both ways. You can't come out and complain, rightly in my view, about the inheritance tax bill that you're now facing on the basis of food security on the one hand, and on the other hand, sell off your farmland for solar panels. Which is it? You know, if you believe in food security, then don't sell out for net zero. And as far as I know, the government is not yet saying that they're going to actually compulsorily purchase farmland.
Right.
So this absolutely hideous policy of carpeting half of Britain with solar panels, not literally half, but a great deal of Britain.
But it will feel like it, though.
It relies on the cooperation of farmers. So there's a simple way to thwart this, at least in the first instance. Farmers, don't sell your land for these purposes. I know it's tempting, but you don't have to do it. And if you do it, you can't complain about the inheritance tax thing.
No, exactly right. And the thing that worries me more about this than anything is that it's Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, who's kind of, pushing it forward and championing it. And his previous job, before he became an MP, was to be head of Lambeth Council. A more unlikely kind of job to prepare you for reconstructing Britain's rural landscape, I can't think of.
I mean, these guys don't get the countryside, do they? There's so many things that they don't get. They don't get the mindset of people that live in rural communities. They don't understand the way the rich work, the super rich. They don't understand why, if you just clobber everybody at that end with incredible taxes, they just leave. They don't get it. They are of the world of Lambeth Council. That is a microcosm of the Labour Party. It is those inner city councils up and down the countries. That's their little mindset, and I don't think that we can change that, but we can put up a resistance to some of this stuff. And
Yes.
Solar panels are not things of beauty.
No.
There's a huge solar farm just outside the village where I live in the Cotswolds, and yes, it's better than huge pylons without a doubt, but it still looks really weird. And when the sun shines on it, you think it's a lake, and it's actually just loads and loads of plastic.
Yeah, it's very unpleasant. I'm not in favour of it. Just before you go, I'll give you this piece of good news. I don't know whether you heard it earlier. The new policy on stopping the boats and the snaggling guns, or whatever Keir Starmer wants to call them this week. Basically, we're giving some money to Tunisia to educate people to learn English so that they don't want to come to Britain. I don't even understand the logic of that.
Right, okay. But the more they understand English, the more they may be tempted to think, could get a nice job over in England
You would
as a
think.
Deliveroo driver or something. Like more wackadoodle nonsense, more taxpayers' money down the drain, more hopeless, completely ineffectual attempts to stop the boats. The only way to stop the boats is to turn back the boats. Forget all these little bits of tinkering around the edges that the government announced yesterday, a new power to examine the mobile phones of people, or arrest people on the boats for threatening to throw people overboard. No, just turn them back.
Yes.
It's not complicated, guys. We have the power to do it.
Also, a bit of a pop quiz for the people making new laws that illegal migrants won't apply to them. Is that when people tend to be illegal migrants, they tend to break the law. They don't care what the law says. They don't care what new law you've introduced. They're criminals.
Yeah, I mean, they're adventurers, they're taking their chances. And honestly, in many ways, I don't blame them. The statistics are all in their favour. If they've got a rubbish life somewhere, not necessarily a war zone, probably not a war zone, and they think, well, they've got the resources to get themselves over to Calais, a pretty much better life beckons. All they need to do is get it over the channel safely, then they get a bunch of free stuff, and sooner or later they get the right to remain and build a new life in Britain. Good for them, bad for us.
I mean, to be honest, some parts of London are more of a war zone than where some of these people are coming from. So they better bring as much armour with them as they can possibly carry. Isabel, great to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott there, Talk's international editor.